Welcome to The Girlfriend God, a podcast in search of and in service to the divine feminine, bringing you an equal mix of academic research and emotional spiritual experience. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to subscribe, follow, rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. Now, together, let's find the divine. Today's episode is brought to you by New World Women, and I have the co-founder, Dawn Morningstar, here with me this morning. And just to name a few, there are several people who've been on the show in season 4 who are also members of New World Women. So Dawn, can you give us that list of names?
Sure, Kelly, I'd be happy to. Dale Allen, whom we all love, she has her new book that's just come out, In Our Right Minds. I'm so excited. And her film of the same name. Marilyn Nyborg, oh my gosh, that woman is a force to be reckoned with in regard to sacred activism and so many other things that she brings. And what a connector she is. And Diya Dannu, oh my gosh, she's doing that beautiful work. She's doing her doctoral thesis on dreams from our ancient mothers, right? She probably might say it a little differently, but that's how I understand it. And Dawn Marion, who is an extraordinary human. She was one of our first founding mothers in New World Women, and she does Akashic Records, and she's partnered with Annie Fitzgerald, who's an amazing singer and musician, and they're doing some very powerful work working with women. So you've had all of these women, or will have all of these women by the time this comes out on your show. And so we really truly are a sisterhood, and we're all supporting one another and coming together in ways that really help to create a new world.
Thank you, John. New World Women is certainly the sisterhood that I was looking for. And all of these women who've been on the show this season, I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do together. For more information, please visit newworldwomen.com. All righty. Welcome to another episode of The Girlfriend God. Today, I'm really happy to welcome Diya Dannu. Is it Dannu? Okay,
Yes.
make sure I was pronouncing that correctly. I had the first name. Diya is completing her doctoral degree in education at Fielding University. Her topic of inquiry explores the transmission of ancestral memory across generations experienced through dreams, focusing on a re-emergent matriarchal wisdom tradition of her foremothers. She's written several essays on the subject matter, contributing to ezines and specialized platforms such as the blog for Feminism and Religion, one of my favorites, Magoism, and DreamTime Magazine. Her 3-year, 3-month, and 3-week ancestral pilgrimage, which was crafted and revealed to her by her ancestors in her dreams, has served to reinforce the importance of knowing and honoring one's origin, true identity, and purpose in life. She is a spiritual guide, creative artist, and sacred dancer. Her engagement with the creative arts is directly related to the image and teachings experienced in her dreams. Diya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for the invitation and the introduction and for having the podcast. I love your
Thank you so much. It's always nice to hear that people enjoy it, because when you have a podcast, like, you have no idea who's listening unless somebody tells you, right? So while I was reading your introduction, the first thing I was thinking was, why this? Is this an interest you've had your whole life? Did you set out on this path, particularly academically, because you had an experience and wanted to know more about it? Or did you always know this was what you wanted to do? Like, how did we get here?
We got here because I was raised with ancestral dream knowledge. So that was just kind of normal for me, and became extremely frustrated by the time I finished my master's that there was no literature out in the world
Mm,
to understand my experiences in a culturally appropriate context. And someone that was raised as a mixed woman in America, that's very slim. Like there's nothing out there. And so I
right.
was like, why is there nothing out there? First, with regards to dreams that are, like I said, culturally aligned, and then matriarchal traditions. Like even in academics, they don't want to say the word matriarchy, but that was the nature of the household that I was raised in, of the family that I come from. Um, and so I was just like, okay, fine. If I don't see it out there, I'm just going to put
Make
it
it
out there.
right, right. I feel that way too. Like when especially if it's a need that I have that doesn't seem to be met, then I figure, okay, this is the divine intervention, right? Telling me if you were looking for this thing that doesn't exist, then maybe you're supposed to be the person to create it.
Yep.
I had a series for a while called The Priestess at the Altar, which was very much born from that because I wanted a spiritual message that I could start my week with that talked about the goddess, and I couldn't find it, so I did it. Of course, I still felt lacking, right? Like I want to be preached at, but it just wasn't the plan, I suppose. Um,
Yeah.
so let me ask you this because it's come up as a topic with other academics on this show. With such a spiritually based topic and a matriarchal based topic, did you run into any resistance when you went to the powers that be and said, this is what I want to write my thesis about?
Absolutely. Left, right,
Yeah.
below, diagonally left, diagonally right.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Um, so this year, 2024, marks 10 years that I've been in and out of doctoral programs.
Okay.
Okay. That's a long time to be working on your doctorate. Um, it started out as I started in a women's spirituality program
Mm.
at the master's level at Sophia University when they had one. And I did not like the way women's spirituality was being taught because it didn't touch upon anything that I experienced. It was heavily rooted in feminism, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but the concept of goddess spirituality came out of the feminist movement.
Mm.
Um, and so it held all of the viewpoints of the women that started the movement
Right.
and left out everything else, left out everyone else.
Right.
Um, and so I got so frustrated with the program that I literally ran away to the PhD program in transpersonal psychology because I thought, fine, let me just focus on dreams. And I can't seem to focus on um, anything women-centered within the way that it's being taught at that school. So I went to PhD in transpersonal psychology and had so many issues there with dreams, the concept of dreams. And so very Eurocentric, neurological, scientific, and left out a lot of indigenous aspects. Like, and when I say indigenous, I mean indigenous to all
Mhm.
peoples of the globe, European indigenous, Asian indigenous, African indigenous, Native American indigenous. Seldom what was being provided to us with regards to dream work touched upon that. And I was raised within a matriarchal kinship worldview, which holds indigenous values. And I didn't get that in the program. So Sophia was almost destroyed pretty much, was going under. I had to take a leave of absence, and then I just kind of coasted for a bit, like going back to the dream, saying, "What do you want me to do with you? I like
Right, right.
to do with this. Like you keep saying, share it with the world. But how do I share it?" Um, I jumped into an MFA in creative nonfiction through Baypath a year later, thinking I could write about it at least,
Mhm.
and creatively write about it. Ah, I was so much. It was like, no, you have to make it real. And I was like, what do you mean make it real? These are the dreams, they're real.
These
They're
are
like, no,
real.
they're your personal, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, no, this is not working. So I left that program. Did my ancestral pilgrimage, didn't even know it was an ancestral pilgrimage till the end of it.
Tell me that
Um,
after we're done with the academic journey, you're gonna have to tell me about that.
yeah, so 2019 rolls up and I'm in New York with my mom and my sister, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try this again. I'm going to take all of the experiences and information I've accumulated these past 20 something years and put it into a PhD. I'm going to try again, but through the Women's Spirituality Program at CIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, for those that don't know. It's in San Francisco. At first, my first semester was really interesting because I was learning about things I I hadn't personally experienced. I
Mhm.
wasn't aware of what was happening in the world with regards to, race relations and um, how certain movements left certain things out, the nuances of it. And I was like, oh, this is very, very informative. But when do I get to start integrating the work that I've, when do I get to start interpreting the data, compiling it, putting it together? And they were like, oh no, you go through the program first. You learn what we've curated women's spirituality to be. And then you work on your thesis. So by the second semester, I was like, I can't deal with this.
Mhm.
Can't deal with this because it was their interpretation and their experience of women's spirituality, um, still leaving out the deeper nuances of how the mothers that's I guess we can go into that as well, how the mothers transmit their cultural knowledge, how
Right.
they transmit memory. Dreams still at this particular institution was you have to ground it because it's still up here. And I'm like, you see how in the Yoruba tradition it's orature, right? It's oral tradition.
Right.
And in Asian tradition, it's oral tradition. A lot of traditions are oral tradition. But you're telling me that dreams are not as valid and equal? Like, I mean, come on. So I got so frustrated with that program, I transferred over to their integral transpersonal psychology program, thinking I can take the dream approach again. Started to learn about the nuances of Western psychology and how they treat dreams. And I was just like, oh no, I can't deal with this either. And in a conversation with a classmate, he said, he was thinking about transferring to fielding. And I was like, what's fielding? And he was like, oh, so he told me all about fielding. And I said, okay, I'm going to look into fielding. I looked into fielding. I emailed the one of the faculty that does the interviews for students that apply. And I said to her, I said, look, I want to demonstrate
Mhm.
this huge gap in all of this literature and human development, in particular, when it comes to identity and growth in women, because we don't have we don't have narratives that are nourishing. We don't have narratives that, predate patriarchy that really helps us to understand our existence, right? And
Right.
so I had like this whole outline. She was like, sure, that your work is deeply spiritual, that she shared her deeply spiritual experiences. She was like, I'm so curious of where you're going to go with this. So I got accepted that following year. And then I go through fielding for 2 years. I get to the point where you start writing your dissertation proposal in human development. My mentor was pretty good with me throughout the 2 years. And all of a sudden, it was just brick roll. I'm like, what is going on here? He didn't like my question. He was like, it has to be scientific. You have to be able to answer it. I'm like, I can totally answer this question.
Right.
Like, and my question at the time was, who am I as a woman of mixed ancestry, raised in America, right? Utilizing, and the goal was to utilize my ancestral dreams and supportive literature to answer that question. And so I was like, I prayed to the mothers and said, look, you got me this far. What do I do? So I reached out to their education department and I said, look, I'm having a hard time because my mentor, who has to be my chair, is giving me a really hard time all of a sudden. And everybody else you have on staff is just not going to work. I want to work with this other guy. His name is Four Arrows. And I was like, he's the only one at your institution that has an Indigenous worldview orientation. Okay. I want to work with him. And if I have to transfer to your program, I will transfer to your program. But I need to work with this person. And I explained why. And then I had to apply. And I was like, we usually accept transfers, but you have to go through the whole thing. I said, fine. Went through the whole thing, finally arrived. And I found myself tiptoeing around my question. I was like, I've had so much issues with people not really understanding that I am trying to show that the concept of matriarchy is a valid thing. Like a mother-centered culture has a tradition, it has longevity. And I want to highlight that. I want to highlight that it's missing in the literature. I want to highlight that dream knowledge is a valid source of information and can be used to enhance academia. I was afraid to say that to him at first, but when I came with what I already had, he was like, let's go for it. And I'm like, okay. 5 months later, the mothers kept showing me more and kept peeling away more layers. And I was like, I'm just going to have to come out and say, hey, how do I use my ancestral dreams, visions, and supportive literature to decolonize the female form, to restore sacred motherhood, and to rejuvenate ancient matriarchal wisdom, to demonstrate alternative ways of being in the world? And he was like, I love that question. I was like, oh my God.
Finally.
Yes, finally. So this week I'll be sending in to him a draft of my dissertation proposal so that we can get it done and I can start finally writing. So it's been a journey, a whole 10-year journey. And I will tell you,
You were very
people,
tenacious. I don't know that many people would have hung in there as long as you did. Like you really had a vision.
to be honest, I was ready to give up a lot of times. And I have my mother to thank, and I have my ancestral mothers because they kept coming to me and saying, it's not about you. And I'm like, damn it, fine, and open a pathway because these
Right.
people are hard-headed. They want me to look at dreams from a Jungian perspective. No, that's not that's not what this is. Right. And then I came across this phenomenal Indigenous scholar of the Anishinaabe people in Canada. She did in her community what I've been trying to do in the greater Western academia. She wrote an article on dream knowledge. And I was like, wait, I've been trying to do this forever. And developing dream citation styles. And I was like, I was told I could not cite dreams. And so yeah, so when I came across her work, I was just like, look, I need to finish this. I need to, like, if she's doing it in her community and the Indigenous people are getting it done,
Mhm.
help me build that bridge. I was like, I will build that bridge. Let me
Right.
that in to show you I'm not crazy. I'm not trying to just put my personal feelings into it because these dreams, seldom do I have dreams about me trying to figure things out well, what happened at work yesterday? Or, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right,
Like, I don't have a lot of those dreams. I have a lot of, here's what happened at the beginning of time. Here's how divine kingship started. Here's what woman is, and here's what everyone else is, and here's what the sons of the mothers are, and here's how you understand this and that, and this is the origins of sacred dance, and this is why you have to do it this way. And I'm like, whoa, this is a whole culture. Okay, cool.
right,
So how do you how do you put that into the whole academic conversation, and how do you write your dissertation in a way that is accessible to people that don't want to go through academia, because
right,
academia has its issues, you know? So
right,
that's where I am. So this year it's going to be indigenous autoethnography. It's not sticking to, the whole Western way of doing an autoethnography, but it has the framework of, the academia. Like here's the order, here's the structure, but putting in indigenous research orientated research methods, because I'm talking about knowledge that's being passed down that I can actually highlight. It's in bits and pieces of these literature that's here, but the literature is still coming from within a patriarchal perspective.
right.
And I'm pretty much, yeah, building that bridge, revealing, hey, women actually do have a whole mother-centered culture that they're
Right.
still subconsciously and unconsciously operating on, but just don't know how to tap into and bring out in a way that's aligned to that and away from a patriarchal understanding of it. So I almost gave up so many times, but it's not about you. It's not about you. And it's like, yeah, you're
Right,
right. Okay, fine, fine.
right. Well, like I said, your tenacity is to be congratulated, because I don't think I personally could have been shot down that many times and not and not thought maybe you're trying to tell me I'm supposed to do something else.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like we really don't give dreams enough credit, or like I find the same thing to be true of personal gnosis, right? Like just because it's something that appeared into my head doesn't make it not true. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know where our information is coming from. If we believe that we are part of the whole of the universe and that we're really all connected, our information comes from limitless
Yep.
sources. And
It,
dreams are no different, particularly because there is some of it rooted in science and how our subconscious works. But the truth is, even after all this time, we know so very little about the brain and about memory and about how all that shit works. We really don't.
Not from a scientific perspective, no.
Right.
Like if you look at a lot of the some indigenous people look at their dreams as, okay, this is a
Correct.
library, right?
Right.
This is the library. We're going to sit and we're going to talk about it. It's going to guide us to make our next steps. And there are some that still do that today, but it's mostly been a lost skill, you
Right.
know, and replaced with rationalizing, everything else. Like if you can see it, then yes, it's true. But if I can't see it, then no, it's not true. Sorry. It's just all
Right.
in your head. And it's like,
Right.
oh,
Well, because we live in this culture of scientific materialism, and that's just that's just where we're at. You know what I mean? Hopefully that tide is turning. And when it comes to like, and I'm always fascinated because between the link between science and spirituality. Like, I'd really like to have somebody on this show come and talk about, but scientists aren't always kind of loose and casual like this show is. But I would love to have somebody come on the show and talk about. I've read so many studies that scientists have done, um, about the link between science and spirituality, like when they've scanned people's brains when they pray, and the same parts of your pleasure center light up that do when you do cocaine or drink alcohol, or you know what I mean, which is fascinating to me. But it only stands to reason that, well, that means something. Let's explore that. You know what I mean? It's
well, I've
and I
when I
assume pleasure centers light up when we dream too. right?
Yeah, it's all connected, not to sound cliche.
No, but it is. It really is.
It is. And what I love about the way that I was raised on this dream knowledge is that the mothers would use science to help me understand, or what we call science. So, but it's mostly cosmology. Like they would use the movement of stars or the lifespan of stars or galaxies or black holes to help me understand their nature and a connection to that. And so I read cosmological articles and whatnot as best as I can. It gets really dense, the
Yeah,
scientific.
yeah,
But I love reading about that because, when they're like, oh, this is we don't know about dark energy as an example. We don't know about this, but it takes up most of what exists in the universe. And the mothers are coming and say, oh, this is what that is. And I'm like, well, I can't go tell them what it is because they're gonna look at me like, we can't measure that.
right, right,
So, so I love science when it's explained in a way that integrates spirit, but when you separate that, it's dry and it doesn't make any sense to me. It's like,
right, right.
how do you
Well, and
connect
it
it?
and it makes sense to me that so much of our information could come from our ancestral dreaming in particular, because so many indigenous cultures and even in some kind of contemporary non-indigenous cultures, dream questing is still a thing. Shamanic journeying is still a thing. And to me, all of those practices are just dreaming on demand, right? We're just using something to facilitate or duplicate the same experience because both of those things are taking place in our subconscious rather than our consciousness, right? Does that make sense?
Yes and no. It does make sense when we're talking about lucid dreaming and being able to incubate a dream or work a dream deeply, like go back to a dream and say, okay, I want to go back into this dream. There are contemporary ways to do that, and that's just as valid. And then you have the understanding of the concept of dreaming itself is no different from your DMT experience. It's just that your DMT experience, you use a plant ancestor to take you to this realm, whereas
Right,
when you're sleeping, your body is still and you're traveling to the realm
right,
natural. Um, and like for me, dreaming is going to another place to get information. It's just I can't physically go there. It's just
right,
my spirit is actually literally going
right,
from place. So I mean, but yeah, there you have contemporary ways of um travel and going back into
right,
to gain information and knowledge based upon where you are, your skill, your connection,
right.
etc. It's not dreaming is not a one size fits all thing. That's another thing that just irks me about the Western approach, or Eurocentric approach to dreams. It's not a one size fits all. It just isn't.
Right.
I can't incubate an ancestral dream. I can't incubate a lucid dream. But
Right.
the ancestors, they come when they come,
Right.
right?
Right.
And if you're just having a lucid dream experience, like I know I see myself dreaming. I'm like, oh yeah. And then the ancestors come in. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I was enjoying the dream. And then you feel information and they go away and that dream is still continuing. It's like, oh my God, wait, I have to remember what they just said.
Right. Right.
So
Well, I think the other problem with the Western view of dreaming or any other sort of spiritual experience, we forget that in ancient history and prehistory, the world we live in today, it's like the spiritual is up here and our material world is down here. But back then, it wasn't, those were seamless, you know what I mean? They weren't separate
they were
things.
together. They
They
were
were
together.
together. Their spiritual life and their material life was one and the same. So everything was infused
Yep.
with spirit.
Politics,
Right. It
alive.
wasn't until, I mean, agriculture has kind of been our downfall, right? The more we learn to, we forget that we belong to the land rather than the other way around. And then, after agriculture came commerce and ownership and, all of those things. But prior to that, it was, if somebody said, "How's your spiritual life?" You'd go, "What?" Right? Like, that's not a separate thing.
Wasn't
It's just
separate.
not.
That's one of I love Dr. Heidi, gosh, I'm going to butcher her last name, Abendroth. She's a German scholar working on reclaiming the word matriarchy and doing really deep work on prehistoric matriarchal societies. I love her work. It's going to be in my dissertation, and whatever information I put out, to help people, I will be referencing her work a whole lot because matriarchal societies are mother origin, mother centered. And if we really look at what mothers were traditionally, they were the first shamans, they were the first, medicine people because they connected to the spirit realms to communicate with all types of ancestors, be it from the earth or from beyond the earth.
Right.
Who's coming back? What do you
Right.
need?
Right.
Do I support this? What needs to happen in the community before you get here? What's the knowledge that you're going to be passing on to me that needs to be imprinted in your body while you're incubating in my
Right.
body, right? So
Right.
she was connected. She had access to knowledge, a wealth of knowledge from all realms, and she ensured that those that were born, those in the community, got what they needed in accordance to what their spirits were here to
Right.
do.
Right.
So mother-centered societies were spiritual societies. Everything was infused with spirit. And then some male child got so jealous of his mother and prayed for,
Right.
or
Right.
to a greater than, and then patriarchy was born, according to what was revealed to me several times over. So part of me wants to actually, that'll be like a project after my dissertation, like actually hunt down in different societies. What was the priest king that got jealous? Who was the priest king?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always shocking to me how little people know about pre-Greco-Roman history, um, including mythology, but that's also very Western culture, right? I mean, if you do a Google search in the United States and look up mythology, all you're going to get is Greco-Roman mythology, unless you specifically type in
They
African
say.
mythology or Indonesian mythology or
Exactly.
um, I have figured out, and I have to go back. Of course, I didn't write it down, but at one point, I figured out how to change the settings on my browser to retrieve results as if I were in a different country.
Is it location?
When I was doing a lot of goddess research, yeah. But of course, like I said, of course, I didn't write it down, and I forgot how to do it, and it's since reverted to the United States. But I'll figure it out again. But it was really interesting to see the difference in the
And
search
that's something,
results.
yeah, that's something that's your bias right there. Like whoever created the search engine,
Right,
algorithms, it's their bias in it already.
right.
Um, even with, women that are in the women's spirituality and goddess spirituality movement, it's like I always like to say to them, you know, anatomically modern humans are about 375,000 years old, but
Mhm.
humanity a good 1 million years, and Western civilization, I don't know, maybe 5,000. If we give it
Right,
it's like
right,
really, really depriving yourself
right.
of a whole prehistoric.
Well, and that's like I tell people, I'm like, in the spiritual world or in religion, I say, patriarchy can really only claim about the last 6,000 years, but goddess worship, we have anthropological and archaeological evidence that goes back 30,000 years. So,
Exactly.
You might
Exactly.
want to
And so,
look into history beyond your typical, but yeah, I complain about Westerners a lot, even though I am one.
like the same. It's like you I also like to point out languaging. It's like, like the kind of language that you're using. For an example, women are like, let's be wild again. And I'm like, well, according to patriarchy, nature is wild, and if it's wild, it needs to be tamed.
Right,
So you don't want to be a wild woman. You want to be what your foremothers were, like
right,
really
right,
even do the research to find that. And that triggers a lot of them. And it's, that's when I further say, this is when I have no mercy. I further say, I was like, then you are an agent of patriarchy, but you're not even still realizing it, how you're perpetuating narratives where that type of patriarchal energy could just come in and really co-opt it, because you're still utilizing the little anchors
right.
for it to come.
It's so insidious. So I've had this conversation with a number of people lately that it and it seems to be whenever I mention this in just typical conversation with everyday people, it seems to blow their mind. Part of what's happened, part of what I see as an issue in women's spirituality or goddess spirituality and how it's portrayed in the world, I started telling people, and they're shocked, that matriarchy isn't the opposite of patriarchy.
Exactly. It's not.
But people don't know that. They're like, what?
Yeah.
Matriarchy doesn't just mean that all the women are in charge.
No, it
No,
doesn't.
that's not what it means. Matriarchal societies are balanced. And you could look no further than, I mean, there are several still existent matriarchal, matrifocal, matrilineal cultures in the world. I'm reading it's a little outdated, but I'm reading Peggy Standay's book, Women at the Center, which is about she lived with for several years, and I'm going to screw up this pronunciation terribly, but I'm going to do my best. She lived with the Minangkabau in Indonesia, which is one of the
Okay.
oldest surviving matrilineal, matrifocal societies in the world. So, and there are several. I think the last time I counted, there were, I don't know, more than a dozen. And some
There's the
of them have been
Musuo in China.
modernized or, they've changed over years. But so in that book, she's talking about how, these different proverbs that they use. And one of them was about, the man goes to his wise counsel or whatever and says, or no, a messenger appears before the man and he asks the messenger, who is most deserving for me to befriend? And the messenger says, your mother. And he says, no, but who is really the best to befriend? And he says, your mother. And he asks again, no, really, who is? And so one more time he says, your mother. And then he asks again. And the messenger says, and then your father.
Wow.
But four times he has to repeat, your mother. It's all about your mother. And she also pointed out something, because the interesting thing about that particular village is that, and I still can't really wrap my head around it, but they apparently have a matriarchal culture that peacefully coexists within Islamic culture, because most of them are Islamic. And I still can't really wrap my head around that, but it pointed out something in the Quran, some line about the world being tamed under the feet of mothers or something like that. I don't know. But I was like, okay, there again, there is a holy book that has been largely misinterpreted by people century after century after century. Like, when I talk to Christians, I'm like, oh, did you know the goddess is like all over the Old Testament? And they're like, no.
No.
Well, that's because you've never looked. You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's
It
the
is.
thing. If
It's
you
so
don't
it's
know,
so insidious, and I get curmudgeony about it. You know what I mean?
if you don't know what to look for, you're not gonna know what you're not gonna know it's there. You're not gonna know how to find it, right? Um, and yeah,
And power hides in plain sight, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's this is
Oh,
our
it's so funny you
this is
say
our
that.
normal.
It's so funny you say that because there's the mothers. So I call them the mothers, and because they're the architects of existence. They've brought forth life. They bring forth life. They've
Right,
created all things.
right.
And they have this habit of giving me these one-liners. You can equate them to like the koans in Japan, like the
Mhm.
Japanese that you have to meditate on. One of them is the secret of a secret is hidden in plain sight. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. What what do you mean by that? And then as days and weeks go by, they'll start revealing more information. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really deep. You don't know what to look for, you're not going to see it,
Right,
right? If your mind isn't opened and that conditioning of, being closed-minded, of
right,
being holistically minded, if it hasn't been opened, you're not going to know what to look for. If you don't listen to your intuition, you don't listen to your ancestral voices, you're not going to know what to look for. It's not going
right,
to exist for you. So of course it doesn't exist for you, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. Right. And so for
right,
somebody raised in a household, look, really the entire family, all of the men say, ask the mother, ask your mother. What does your mother
right,
say?
right,
Like they're all like that. Yeah, they may be the ones that bring in the money, but it's really a shared responsibility with the mom at the end of the day.
right,
You want to ask the moms, ask the mamas, um, to be raised with that type of kinship worldview and the integration of ancestral memory and knowledge. Of course, I'm going to look at the rest of the world and scratch my head and be like, that's not normal.
right, right.
That's how I was raised. I'm sorry, but no.
But so
And then there,
many, I mean, particularly in the United States, we have such an inability to see past our own borders and forget that we are a pretty fucking young country.
exactly,
Yeah. I
exactly.
mean, comparatively speaking. Um, so I was going to ask you, a couple things. One, so when you receive these kind of knowledge transmission through let me back up a minute. Do you get ancestral messaging in your waking life?
Yeah, oh yeah, I do.
I figured as much. I just figured I'd clarify. Um, when you dream of your ancestors, are they always ancestors that you were aware of, or do you dream of ancestors that go back, hundreds of years, thousands of years, that you just know in your dream that they are your ancestor? And I ask you that question because it wasn't a dream, but it was kind of like journeying with this woman who does ancestral healing work, which was really
Mhm.
just a guided meditation. But I'm pretty practiced at meditation, so I can kind of get in a zone and see it all in my mind pretty easily in that kind of in between state. And it was a long meditation, but I wound up someplace. I have always had this sneaking suspicion that I have ancestry that dates back to, it's not a sneaking suspicion. I know this because of my dreams and my own intuition and other experiences I've had, back to like the frozen Arctic tundras and Siberia and Eastern Russia. And in my vision, this woman who I've obviously never seen before, like walked right up to me and she was like, I am your ancestor. My name is Elena Elistrova. And I was like, okay.
Hi.
But I know that to be true. You know what I mean? And I don't really need the evidence of it. I mean, I'm sure if I went on genealogy.com and traced my ancestry back far enough, I could probably come to that conclusion, but I don't need to. You know what I
Right.
mean? I saw it. It felt true when she said it, and I was like, because who's going to show up in my vision and fucking lie to me, right?
And that, not only that, who's going to show up and give you such detailed information that when you do decide to go look it up, you're like, oh my goodness, I couldn't have come up with that. I did
Right,
not know. You know what I mean?
right.
So the ancestors that come to me that reveal origin stories, tradition, they're old.
Hmm.
They're so old that they no longer have human form.
Okay.
They're like humanoid shape that is like completely cloaked. Sometimes the cloak looks like the fabric of the cosmos itself, and you
Hmm.
could see stars and things scrolling through it. Sometimes they come in skeletal form, and that to me says, okay, you're extremely old, but you once walked the earth. What you did, what you called yourself, apparently doesn't matter. It's the knowledge that
Right.
you're bringing forth to help me to remember. Um, I remember going into ceremony through plant medicine with cannabis and seeing this woman, you know, in like the Finnish woodlands in
Hmm.
the winter. And as I saw her and she was drumming and vocalizing, I knew, I was like, oh my God, that's an ancestor. Like it's just this knowing.
It's a knowing.
And like shortly after that, that's when those ancestors started to teach me how to vocalize. And in that culture, it's called yoiking. And so what you're doing is you're not singing about something, you're singing the thing, which is
Okay.
very, very, very different. So it's like really being able to tap into the essence of what's being vocalized.
Right.
Um, so yeah, but usually the ancestors that come through, it's like they're the elements themselves, or they're the cosmic elements, and they come down and speak, or it's just the voice itself, and they'll say, "This is who I am," and I'm like, "Can you explain a little more?"
Hmm.
And then they'll give me visuals, but it's always of like an element or a series of elements or an environment that helps me to understand their nature. But they won't come. The oldest of the old never come in human form because that's not what they are. They're primordial cosmic energy. So I get a
Right.
mixture.
So, do you ever dream of ancestors in your like immediate past, grandmothers, great grandmothers, aunts?
Oh, yeah, they come through. They usually come through to talk about more worldly issues, like with the family. Like so,
Okay.
like my grandmother, for example, my grand aunt. They recently came to me about 2 months ago, and they were like, when are you gonna start the family reunion again? And I was like, after my dissertation. They're like, yeah, don't worry, wait until 2025. And I was like, okay, cool. So yes, I do get dreams from certain recently departed, but it's usually in connection to the bigger reason as to why I'm here. And
Right,
so,
right.
and that's what I love too about that, because my family, my extended family, they're all Christian. They're mostly Christian. Um, they still respect and honor dreams. They know that I'm a big dreamer, and they're like, yeah, they know that those are important. And if somebody's like, oh, I had a dream, they listen to that. That's great.
Hmm.
Um, excuse me. But everything else, that it's like, Dia is she's not the weird one, but she's the one that's doing the ancestral dreaming work. Just let her do her thing.
Right,
And
right, right,
when they transition, when like my grandmother, when she was here, it was just like, just do what you're happy to do, do whatever makes you happy. But on the other side, she's like, oh, are you gonna be working on this? And I'm like, no, she was here, she was talking like this. So yeah,
right.
when they transition over, um, it's a delight to hear them talk about the mission, so to speak.
So tell me about your ancestral pilgrimage.
Yeah, I had no plans to do such a thing. It was never a life goal, nothing. 2015, I think it was March of 2015, I applied to the MFA program at Bay Path. And by April, I was accepted and about to register. And I was like, that's a really fast turnaround. It's usually like about 3 to 6 months,
Right.
the whole application process. But it was fast. And so when that happened, I was like, oh, this was really meant to be. I'm meant to get my MFA in creative nonfiction. Um, so at the end of April, I was told, oh, we have a 1 week writing workshop in Dingle, Ireland. You know, you can take that as part of your degree requirement. And I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to go to Ireland. Never been to Ireland. I've got Irish
Okay.
ancestry. Sure, I'll visit ancestral lands, do some writing,
Nice.
all for it. During that time, though, like my mother had just filed for divorce. The house was sold. Everyone was scattered to the wind. Um, so it was like things weren't really positive at home. So like
Mhm.
home was at another relative's place. And at first, you know, we thought it would be okay to be there for a bit to get ourselves together. And so I was like, sure, I'll go to school. My father had passed away the year before, so I was still dealing with a whole bunch of
Okay.
upheaval. Um, my mother was looking for work, my brother was looking for work, and so my aunt was just like, you know, just stay here. We've got extra room, whatnot. But then the dreams started happening, and my grandmother came to me, and she was like, expressed her concern. She was like, I'm worried it's not safe where you are. Of course, that's shocking to me because then she's talking about, you know, a relative. I'm living with a relative and you're telling me it's not safe to be there. So I told my mom, I said, I'm booking my ticket to Ireland and I'm just gonna stay there for the full 90 days because you get, I don't know if you still do, but you know, a
Mhm.
visa upon arrival with a US passport, you get 90 days. So I fly out July 5th, 2015, and it was on a one-way ticket. Because I wanted some time to just figure out what to do. 90 days should have been enough time, right? I
Mhm.
get there, dreams automatically start happening. I'm like being awakened for 7 days straight at a specific time. And I'm like seeing these beautiful, I don't know, magical leaves,
Mm.
you know, create around my bed and everything. And I'm like, hi, it's wonderful
Mhm.
to see you. Thank you. You know, at the end of it was weird because I got there early. The writing workshop happened at the end of July, and I got there July 5th. And my birthday was on the 7th. So I had a couple of weeks to kind of just explore Tralee because I was in Tralee, which is right out of Dingle. So anyway, so I'm there. Um, I learned some new things about myself in a couple of weeks. You know, my mother's starting to have some spiritual issues, and she's like, "Hey, I need help," and I'm like, prayers aren't helping. And so I remember sitting on the phone with her and I was like, let's just be silent for a minute and let me ask, what do I do to help you? And I heard dance. And I said, okay. And so I remember doing, you know, the dance that was taught to me in my dreams. And as I did that dance, the goddess or the mother of the land came while I was dancing. And I'm dancing, but in my mind, I'm like, I see you, but I'm not going to talk to you right now because I have to do this dance offering. Talk to me in my dreams, okay? Um, I finished the dance. I call my mom back, and she's like, I'm starting to feel better. I'm like, good. She's like, what did you do? I was like, I danced. She's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I start to hear crows. And I'm like, Mom, I've been here for almost 2 weeks and I've never heard crows. It sounds like they're in the kitchen. So I go to the kitchen and they're flying back and forth across the window. I was like, I've never seen that. I think I need to go to sleep now. So I hang up the phone, sleep. It was Moore, Goddess Moore, or Morrigan. She was at the window. So in the dream, I
I
walk
knew
up.
that's what you were going to say when you told me about the crows.
Yeah. So I walked to the window in the dream and she's standing there all majestic. Oh my gosh. Her entire gown was just raven and crow feathers, and her crown was just this beautiful feather crown. And she was like, I understand why you did what you did, but have a care as to how intensely you dance, because there are sleeping energies that need to remain asleep at this time. And because I said to her, I was like, I needed to protect my mom. There are some spiritual things that are going on. So she was like, I understand that. I'm not going to get involved, but I'm just telling you, if you're on my lands, be lightly. And so I said, okay. 2.5 months later, I come to find that, financial aid at the school doesn't work the way that I normally, thought it would. And I wasn't going to have a ticket back to the US.
Oh no.
So, yeah. So, I ended up befriending this Irish woman that was going on her spiritual journey. And she was really curious about the dreams that I was having. So she hosted me, for about a month and a half after the writing workshop. And so 5 days before my visa expired, because she was like, I can't help you beyond your visa. Like you have to find a way. Like you can, just keep me posted. 5 days before the visa was up, I had a dream about my stepfather. Now my stepfather was arguing with my mom in a dream, and she was like, you have to help her. And then he put some money on like the headboard of the bed that I was supposed to be sleeping on in the dream. And so I woke up and I was like, what does my stepfather know? So I call him, or I send him a message, and he calls me. He's like, yeah, I have family in London. Just go to England. Now, my stepfather is an Ashanti prince of the Akan people in Ghana. I also have Akan ancestry. So whenever he shows up in my dreams, it really means it's the Akans that are speaking, not specifically him. And so I was like, okay. So he gave me his sister's information. And I was like, hey, I was in Ireland for class, and I kind of need to get out of Ireland. Can I come and stay but just until I figure out how to get back to the US? And they're like, yeah, sure. So that's how I got to England. And then they were like, so what exactly are you doing? And I was like, oh, so I'm in the degree program. So I kind of had to validate for them why I didn't have a return ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'm writing my dreams, and I want to publish them in a way that helps people to understand. Oh, look, the International Association for the Study of Dreams is having a conference in the Netherlands. So I kind of want to stay on this side of the world and do a presentation. And I hadn't submitted a proposal yet. That was just me covering up the whole, it's crazy back in the US. I can't go back. I don't know what else to do. So after they were like, one of the aunts was like, yeah, I live out in the country. You can stay there until your visa is up, or until you hear word from, this organization. And so then I applied to present. It was funny because the timing, I hadn't realized I still had time to submit the proposal. And so for 6 months, I stayed in England, documenting dreams that just kind of really opened up a whole lot of, this is what your purpose is. And I'm like, oh my God, are you like, so do I have to travel to different countries to get this information? Like, how does dreaming about ancient Egypt connect to being on the lands in East Anglia in England?
Right.
So at that time, I didn't make the connection. And then I had a sister in Belgium, and she was getting ready to go through a surgical process, and she needed caretaking for a couple of months. So I prayed. I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? Like, I can't go to the Shenzhen zone now because my visa would be up when she would need the help. So what country do I go to? Um, and from England, what I did was I applied to volunteer at this hotel in Turkey. And just that, it was from England to Turkey was a matter of prayer, saying, guide me to where I need to go. Like, do I go back to Ireland? There's Turkey, and then there's Asia. Like, tell me which ones to go to apply to. And that for me was more synchronicity. That was like the first option that came up. I applied, and like within an hour, the host got back and was like, yes, come to Mount Ida. And I was like, Mount Ida's in Greece. And he's like, no, there's a Mount Ida here in Turkey. And I was like, really? I didn't know that. I go there, have these phenomenal dream experiences, end up visiting Greece on Lesbos, which is right across the waterway from Turkey. You can see it on the coast. Go back to Turkey, spend out my days, like I think 2.5 months there, go to Belgium, help my sister. In Belgium, when it was time for me to go, I sat in meditation for like almost 2 hours. I was like, I need you to show me where to go, because the dreams at this point, it was a lot of revelation around what my purpose what I should be following to the dreams. So a lot more information about past civilizations, matriarchal civilizations. And in the vision, it was a lot of ancient Indian dancing. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I was like, you're not making any sense. I was like, what am I supposed to do with, what am I supposed to do with this vision? Went online, looked for something in India or Nepal, and I received a message from a boarding school in Nepal. They're like, why don't you come teach, come with us for a couple months and teach here? And I was like, okay, somebody from Nepal is calling me to go. Okay, cool. That's fine. Let me go there, and I'm just gonna follow through because nothing else was coming up. I get stranded in Dubai for 17 hours. Don't fly Pegasus Air, whatever you do, because you can't get in touch with them. If they cause you to miss your flight, that's too bad. A total stranger paid for my ticket to get from Dubai to Nepal. And then from Nepal, gosh, where did I go to? I think I went to Egypt after that. And it was seeing the pyramid, like literally, like just seeing the pyramids and having seeing a conversation between like an Egyptian queen and her son. And I was like, are you telling me to go to Egypt? Like literally, like, are you telling me to go to Egypt? I would look online at this volunteer site and I would say, okay, I'm gonna apply. If that's the case, then I'm going to get a response back. And literally within an hour, I would get a response back. Yes, come to Egypt. And I'm like, okay, great. Same thing with Italy. It was a dream around oracular temples. And I'm like, I don't think there's like an oracular temple in Italy. Yes, there is. Yes, there were. So it would be like that. Like I would say, okay, look, this is where I have to go. If you don't give me information on where to go next, if you don't guide me on where to go next, I'm gonna have to be deported back to the US. And they're gonna take my passport. I'm gonna have to pay that back with interest. All right. And then they will forever see that there's this American that doesn't travel with a round trip ticket and keep tabs on her. Like, do you want to interrupt this whole process, or do you want to get to where I need to go? And literally something would happen. Like I would get an email message from, a retreat center saying, we love your profile, why don't you come out here? And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go. I don't know what I'm gonna find when I get there. And I get there, more information about this tradition comes through. One of the most amazing experiences was when I was in Croatia. I had a dream about being given an omphalos for Italy, in Italy, between Florence and Bologna. And I was just like, there's no omphalos there. Is there? So I do a Google search, and sure enough, Monte Ovolo, the mountain of the ovum, had an oracular center there. Of course, there's a chapel on top of it now. Um, and there's this university professor at Bologna University that did several papers on how that oracular center is connected to the Donna and Delphi. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know that, but that was revealed in a dream while I was in Croatia. And Italy was the next stop after that, but not that location because you need to drive. And I didn't, I don't speak Italian, didn't know anybody that could actually take me to that location. But things like that, like they would come to me and here's this thing in Italy, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just apply. Within an hour, within half an hour, yes, come. When can you come? So that's how I moved for 3 years, 3 months and 3 weeks to the date, right? July 2015 to October 2018. And the way I knew it was over, one, I was in Italy for the second time in Como, Lake Como, and the hostel I was at, I remember waking right before I woke up, one of the ancestral mothers, she was doing work and she turned and looked at me and she says, your journey has come to an end. And then I wake up for the day and I said, no, I heard so much about, this tradition I'm supposed to reestablish and bring awareness to. I want to stay a little longer. Communication started to break down. People started to just be mean left and right. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess it is time for me.
It's really time to go home.
It's really time for me to go. And the last place I was at, the woman, Moderna, I think it was Moderna, Modena, she was crazy. Like she would ask me to do something and I would do it, and then she would yell and throw a fit. And so there was a guy that worked for the theater. He did an Airbnb for one of her rooms. And I remember sitting down at the computer looking for a flight. And I was just like, I have to go. Let me at least look for a flight and ask a family member, can you pay for it? So I remember he sat across from me, Max, and he was just like, so why are you here? So I told him, I was like, I've been traveling for 3 years, 3 weeks. And, at that time, it was just 3 years and 3 weeks because I was going through flight dates, and told him how I traveled. And he just, first he was sitting forward. And then when I was done, he kind of just sat back and he was like, how do I compete with that? And I was like, why do you want to compete with it? I was like, well, what's the point? He was like, I graduated from the top opera of the whole world and blah, blah, blah. And when I tell people that that's where I work, they're just so impressed. But you're telling me you traveled based on your dreams? And I was like, yeah. Isn't that normal? He's like, no. So what was really great about him is that the woman that rented out the space for Airbnb was really nasty. And I told him my experience there. He was like, I have to go back to Milan in X amount of days. Why don't you find a hostel just for the day, and then I'll come pick you up. You can stay at my apartment until you leave Milan, because I can't stay there. I can just drop you off. Then I have to go back to this other theater place and whatnot. So, in things like that, that's what happened. Like usually when something negative would happen that would impact my ability to move from one place to the next, someone would be dropped in a path, and they're like, your story is freaking awesome. Here, come meet my friends. Here, come stay here. Do whatever you need to do for X amount of days, and then just don't forget about me. And it's like, okay, cool. So when I booked the ticket, it was October, I think it was 18th or 28th, one of those days, and I counted. I was like, Mom, it's 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks to the date. You can't make this up. Like it just
Right?
that's just how it happened. There were just times I didn't have a source of income. I didn't have savings. So people are like, well, how did you travel? Because you tell people I've been documenting my dreams for about 20 years. This is how I've lived my life. This is the dream I had on this day, and this is the culture that it's connected to. And people on the other side of the Atlantic are more open
Yes.
to dream knowledge and ancestral dream and reconnecting to the ancestors. Over here,
I know.
right?
I know.
So that's how I was able to move from place to place. And it was like really surrendering to that process. It was like, am I supposed to go to Turkey? Okay. I don't know what the connection is, but if that's the case, get me there. And then I'd get there. But when I came back, I had to pull up a couple of DNA tests that I'd taken years prior. I was like, wait a minute, do I have ancestry from all these places? And I look at it, sure enough, every single country that I was guided to, not only do I have ancestry from there, there's strong matriarchal prehistoric cultures that existed there.
Mm.
So it's like, oh my gosh, this is why that's why I jumped back into the PhD programs, because even though I can't tell you the name of my Turkish ancestor, having genetic ancestry from these places, that's just enough. That's enough for spirit to say, hey, you forgot.
Right, right.
Forgot about this part of your cultural tradition and heritage. You need to remember. You need to help other people remember. So that, I went to it was Ireland, England, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, Croatia, Turkey, Nepal. I think 8 countries, 8, 9 countries. And I did that twice. So it was like the first time back to Ireland and then fly out of Italy.
So I think when you're done with your PhD, you need to write that as a
Yeah.
book, but instead of Eat, Love, Pray, it's going to be Dream, Trust, Go.
I love that. Ooh, I gotta write that down.
You should write that down, but you got to give me credit, okay?
I
Just a little
definitely
nod in the forward would be great.
go. I like that. Because a lot of people have said that you should write about the pilgrimage. And I'm like, I need to actually sit down and
Yeah,
go through everything. Because I want to do that. I want to go through the travel, the ticketing, the bookings and
yeah,
all the
yeah.
stuff, pictures and mind those pictures because I've taken a few, but that
Don't
that
wait
could be
too long because by the time you're my age, you won't remember a whole lot of it.
No, that's a project to work on right after the
Yeah,
dissertation. There's
yeah.
just so much that can come out of this dissertation. And I'm thankful for my chair because he's like, you have this big tree, and I think it's great, but your dissertation is about a part of the tree. It's like, God damn, okay.
Right, right.
So there's definitely that is on the list of immediate things to get to after this dissertation is done.
Finally,
Yeah,
right?
final 10 years. I'm over it. I'm like, I just want to write it. Just let me write it. And they're like, yeah, we're getting there.
I had a friend who I met here in Champaign, and she was at the University of Illinois, and I think it took her about as long, but I don't remember what her dissertation was about. She was German, and then she went back to Germany and was teaching the whole time and just kept delaying and delaying and delaying, but she eventually got it done. So, all right, well, I think it's time to wrap it up. We've been talking for over an hour, but that flew by. And really,
Yeah.
in all sincerity, that is a book I would read. And I'd be like, oh, I remember when she told me about this.
I mean, because
But
that's the biggest
wrap
thing.
up the academic first.
Yeah, like it's because I've had people say, well, how have dreams influenced your life? And I was like, well, a whole dance tradition was taught to me over the span of 15 years in my dreams. And I was told to go refine my movements. And so Odissi, it's one of the classical dances of India. Odissi is a fusion of traditional dances.
Mhm.
And what I was taught in my dream is more connected to the Mahadi tradition, which was a mother-daughter tradition, right? Nobody talks about these things, right?
Right,
Especially
right,
when you learn Odissi, they don't really talk about the foundation of Odissi, which is the Mahadi tradition. Again, right? The men that created Odissi left them out of the conversation. So when I tell people, yeah, I was taught to dance, I went to my first refinement of dance vocabulary class, and the teacher was like, I don't believe that this is your first class. I've been teaching for 15 years and those aren't beginner moves. And so I said to her, I'll print out my dreams. You read them so you can understand I'm not trying to just take a free class. Like I was told to learn how to do choreography and put them together. I was taught everything else that I needed to know about how to move and the philosophy. Um, and because like the biggest point is it's not just me receiving the dreams and hoarding it. I would love to just hoard it just for myself, right?
right, right,
But it's really about showing how matriarchal cultures transmit knowledge. They do it through the body. How do you remember that? Through your dreams, right? And so what are dreams? How do you access that? It's not a typical orature oral tradition that
right,
you see, written tradition that you see in patriarchy. It's very, very different. So that's how it's impacted my life. I was taught something, I shared it, and when I do it as an offering, it moves spirit. And it's like, wow, that's a whole tradition. Yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you for the longest. So how do you augment that? How do you enhance academic research with dream knowledge? Not personal lucid dreams, but literal ancestral knowledge. How do you bring those two together? So that's what the PhD is for. And then everything else that I can't put in the PhD will be for the general audience so that people can start talking about it and living it
Right,
themselves, you
right.
know?
I can't wait to see the things you do.
I can't wait to. So that makes it less because it's hard. It's really hard. It's when I talk about when I say the mothers, I really mean these primordial energies.
Yes,
I'm talking like pre-concept of goddess, because you look at the word goddess, it's a female god. It's like her in relationship to him,
right,
and the mothers, they're in relationship to creation itself. So there's a whole culture around that. And
right,
I can point out cultures that existed that were about this and not goddesses of patriarchy, so to speak.
right,
And so that's at least to awaken women to that and let that work on them in the
right.
way it needs for them.
I try and encourage women to use the terms God and goddess interchangeably. Like I say goddess out of reverence, and I like the way goddess sounds. I like the way it feels in my mouth. Just all, and the feeling I get when I use that word. Um, but depending upon who I'm talking to, I mean, if I'm talking to somebody about God or the God concept or the God idea, I mean her whether I say God or not,
Yes,
right? Because intellectually, I understand that the God principle is genderless, right?
it is.
I get that. Um, but there are very cultural reasons why we choose to use the term goddess, right?
Mhm.
Because until we live in a world where you can say goddess in mixed company and not raise any eyebrows, you know what I mean? Because that's always the argument from the other side, right? Well, like, why does it, if you believe that, if we know that God is genderless and a non-physical entity, what difference does it make what we say? It fucking makes a difference. It makes a difference.
It
Is that
makes a
right?
huge difference. Yeah, languaging matters. People
Yes.
don't
Yes.
get that. Names name things. Names define that
Right.
which is named. So it's
Right.
very, very important. It's very important.
All right. So you've listened to the show, so you know
I
what's
know.
coming next.
Yes, that's right.
I know in the beginning it was fun. Nobody had listened to the show, so nobody knew what the questions were, but
I forgot though, so it's
oh,
clean
okay.
slate.
Well,
Clean
good,
slate.
good, good. Okay. Current, wait. Oh, I almost sent them out of order, and I've been doing this for 44 episodes. So, tell me something about yourself that people who know you would be surprised to learn, or even people that don't know you.
Sometimes when certain celebrities pass away, I dream about them and help them transition from one realm to the other.
Oh, example?
Aliyah Houghton, when she passed away, that was my first time.
Hmm.
Um, Paul Walker, when he passed away, he didn't know he passed away. So I remember sitting, having a conversation, trying to explain it to him. Chadwick Boseman was my favorite because that man, he was just glowing and so appreciative. He was in paradise. And I'm like,
Mm.
this man is living it up here. Oh my gosh. Uh,
It's
but he was just,
nice.
people don't get it's paradise on the other side. So he was just really expressing his gratitude of being able to share his gifts and talents with the world and just really deeply grateful. Um, the one of the recent Ray Stevens, I think was it Ray Stevens? Is that his name? No. He played on a recent Ahsoka series. I forget his name, but he
Okay.
was an English Scottish actor married to an anthropologist. He passed away, and he came and he shared his ancestry with me,
Nice.
talking his ancestry, and I was just like, this is amazing. But
Cool.
yeah, that they wouldn't know. I don't share that with anyone, so
Well, you just did and shared it with however many people listen to this episode. So it will no longer be a thing that surprises people. Okay. Your current favorite television series, and if you don't watch TV, then current favorite movie.
current favorite. So no, I don't watch TV, but I would say Wheel of Time on Prime, Amazon
Okay.
Prime.
Okay. We love that show.
I recently finished watching that, and I love the
So
concept of the
good.
eyes.
The
I don't know.
Aes Sedai. Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah.
I if I could manifest the weaves when I dance, then I'd be
Uh-huh.
like, but it's just energetically felt. So I that's the one right now.
Okay.
Wheel.
And finally, if your life were a movie, what would be the theme song on the soundtrack?
Ooh, that would be. That's so funny you say that because I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, if I were to do a documentary, the name of the song would be The Sun Queen by Rock Nardin and the Secession Studios. It's instrumental, but
Okay. We've had instrumental answers before. So I do have a public playlist on Spotify. I think right now I've only got like the first 2.5 seasons up there, but I'll be working on that after this season. But I have to find an Apple iPhone user to make the same list for me in iTunes because I'm an Android person. So I just need to send somebody the list who's willing to make a public playlist. Yeah, because right now it's only available on Spotify. But it is quite an eclectic mix, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Hmm.
Okay, Dia. Well, I'm going to do that thing that Zoom does, and the screen's going to go blank, and it's abrupt and rude, but it's how I roll. So,
It's fine.
but I will be in touch with final files. I mean it sincerely when I say I really am excited to see the things that you do.
Thank you.
And I look forward to reading that book in the future. And I'll read your dissertation if you want. I used to do copy editing, so
No, that's totally. I'm. I'm like, read it. So
read it, read it, read it, read it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'll definitely be like, hey, here's a draft. What do you think?
Yeah, happy to, happy to. Okay, Jim. Well, until next time, I wish you peace and the love of the goddess.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And wish the same to you. Stay warm and enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks for watching or listening to The Girlfriend God. Don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe, follow, and comment. Episodes drop every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and you can follow The Girlfriend God on social media on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.